as you can see, this is the first slide, and I have just got notes, and so I'm just going to read along. So this is basically a conversation about loss and damage caused by fossil fuels and environmental degradation. And I think it's especially important to talk about this in the run-up to COP27, but it is always important to talk about this considering just how far we've come in the wrong direction. And photos included in this presentation are from Reverend Paul Jeffrey, who is a photojournalist who works internationally with organizations like Church World Service and other organizations to tell stories about what's happening on the ground. And these photos, most of them were taken of people that were taken by him in the Sindh Valley that has been most affected. Also, the photos here are also from Harris bin Saqib, who has literally, he lives in Pakistan. You can tell from his photos the great love he has for the people and the place where he lives. It just really comes through in the photographs. And then some regular photographs from Unsplash and other places that show particular things. So this young man, he is, again, this is a picture from Paul Jeffrey, and Pakistan is among the countries most vulnerable to climate chaos. And I'll explain why, and we'll talk about why. And Pakistan is also among the nations who are least responsible for the emissions that are causing so much harm. So as we talk about loss and damage, we're talking about actual damages and actual losses, but we're also talking about international policies that seek reparations and remedy. So loss and damage is about asking those who cause the losses to pay for the damages. And I like this statement from Loss and Damage collaboration. Economic losses and damages would include things like the loss of your home or property, but there are non-economic losses as well. Things like loss of territory or loss of culture, including inability to continue your traditional practices or accessibility to sacred sites, and the breaking of the connection of the land, the loss of the sense of place. I think we cannot emphasize how big that is and how much of a trauma that is to the human heart. So we certainly think of money, though, in terms of loss and damage. And speaking of money, so the money is available, but it is concentrated among the wealthier countries, the very countries who have a lot more responsibility for causing climate change in the first place. These same countries are also not feeling the effects to the same degree as those countries that have little to do with it. They also seem less motivated to make changes. Conversely, other countries, many with lower economic measurables, the ones that have contributed the least to the CO2 emissions in the atmosphere, these are often places more vulnerable to the climate hazards. They have fewer resources often to deal with what results. And basically, they can't make other countries stop pumping oil or fracking that gas. And meanwhile, they are experiencing not only the suffering, but an added urgency for mitigation. This is quoted from The Lancet. They've just come down with their new 2022 countdown study, which it is worth looking through. It is a tour de force, just zeroing in on the need to deal with climate change. So, oh my goodness, the little one. So this, back to our focus, which is the country of Pakistan. So we're taking a look at all that big stuff and we're zeroing right in on Pakistan. This is a quote from the foreign minister of Pakistan. He is quoted in an interview with CNN, and he says, "We consistently see climate devastation in the forms of floods, monsoons, extensive droughts, extreme heat waves, and frankly, the people of Pakistan. The citizens of Pakistan are paying the price in their livelihoods and their lives for the industrialization of rich countries that has resulted in climate change." So I'm not a scientist. Woo! And I definitely didn't do well in math class. I worked hard, but didn't do that well. So I'm not going to try to be any of those things. I'm going to report from trusted sources on those things. But I also really, where I come from this is this idea of the moral focus as a person of faith. And looking at that extra piece, not just the quantification of how much rain, but what my faith tradition teaches me. So yeah, here we go. The moral focus of do no harm, regardless of what our tradition is. There are many, many traditions, and we'll still see images from the different traditions that are part of Pakistan's culture and history. All of the traditions that faith traditions have a way of talking about the beginning, about the garden, the life ways that are connected very much to the land, the way that indigenous peoples come to understand where they live and how they live there, and the religions that flourished out of that. And guess what? The carbon dioxide level of the atmosphere was then 280 parts per million. So this is Mohenjo-daro, and it is one of the only, I think might be the only archaeological remains of the Indus Valley civilization. And it was, it's like 5,000 years old, all during this 280 parts per million, this time of human flourishing. And now, with climate change, it has actually sustained massive damage from flooding in 2022. Also, not pictured, but the site of Kodiji, there's a fort. It's a little higher, but the main indigenous pre-Indus culture, again, 6,000 years old, built at 280 parts per million, is under 4 feet of floodwater in Sindh province. So humans have been building monuments as expressions of faith, as we know, for millennia at 280 parts per million. And in Pakistan, in the Sindh province, where we're focusing on there, you will find a Hindu temple where it is said that the Lord Shiva shed tears in mourning for his wife Sati when she died. And the sacred ponds that are there are said to be filled with water from his tears. And these ponds, too, are at risk from climate effects. They were built at 280 parts per million. As were many Buddhist shrines and stupas. This is the Thul Hero Khan, and it is one of many sites that were damaged in the flooding. This is the Malke and Shah Jahan Mosque. Now I'm going to butcher some of these names. I mean, no disrespect, actually practice to try to get them okay, but I'm still going to mess them up, so I'm asking forgiveness there. But these monuments arose in the 14th and 18th centuries and are tomb complexes along the Silk Road. And movements include here the rising of Islam in the country, and also in the 17th century, this stunning mosque. Look at the intricacy of the tile, and it's to imagine humans just flourishing as we have been, at times hurting each other, but many times flourishing, and doing that in this beautiful, wonderful planet Earth of 280 parts per million. So Islam arrived in Sindh in 711 AD and just absolutely blossomed into the Muslim faith, a majority Muslim country that is now. And the Faisal National Mosque is in Islamabad. And I saw a number of photos of the mosque for this. Oh my goodness, one day I want to actually see it. It's just absolutely beautiful. Christianity also arrived in Pakistan with the St. Thomas Christians in 52. It never flourished in the same way in Pakistan, and the numbers are about 1 to 2% Christians in the country. And this is Sharif, which is also the city of saints. And this city was founded 4,000 years ago. It has been through many different cultures, and luckily was built above the flood, where refugees and rural farmers were able to meet. And again, what we're really trying to get at here is look at what we have done at 200 parts per million, 280 parts per million. Look at how important that stability over thousands of years has been for human flourishing, for expressions of spirituality, for expressions of religion, for expressions of culture, community, sacred sites. And more recently, this one was built in 1927, and it was built at 306 parts per million, because already we had that line going up. And the devastation of these monuments, of this history against the actuals of climate change, people in Pakistan, professionals in Pakistan, conservationists in Pakistan are getting together to talk about it. There was a conference shortly after the flooding to talk about how do we preserve these heritage sites, because it's not 280 anymore. Another photo from Paul. Now we're going to shift to like climate science. Climate, what does the climate even do in Pakistan? Why is it so affected? So Pakistan has about well over 7,000 glaciers. You can argue about how many hundreds after that. More than any other country or region except at the poles. And the borders within Pakistan are hundreds of miles of mountain range, including the Hindu Kush Mountains and a swath of the Himalayas, the Karakoram mountain range. And these mountains with the snow and the glaciers, they provide fresh water for well over 1 billion people, well outside in that whole region, including Pakistan. And this young woman, her name is Hafisa. She was 17 years old when this picture was taken, meaning that she was born in 1988, and she was born at 350 parts per million. And in her lifetime, carbon emissions have only gone up. This is Katora Lake. It just means bowl, which I just loved about that. So the melting glaciers in those top mountains, they create glacial lakes. They create runoff that runs down the mountains into the rivers, specifically the Indus River. And what happens is with the melt, what we're getting is a lot more of these glacial lakes. We're getting them in pockets of ice. We're getting them where they're not supposed to be. And they fill up, and there used to be, you couldn't even get to them. So there wasn't water in the first place. That's what it was. And then there was water, but it was freezing. And now some of these lakes, the water is warm enough to swim in. And I learned a new climate term. I hate learning new terms. In Oregon, I've learned things like mega drought, gigafire, and bomb cyclone. Well, here's a new one for me, GLOF. And what it means is glacial lake overflow flood. So these beautiful, spectacular lakes, all located in Himalaya, Hindu Kush, and Karakoram mountain ranges that intersect Pakistan, are at risk of bursting and releasing millions of cubic meters of water and debris in just a few hours. And Al Jazeera reported that 16 burst just before July, by the time, July of 2022. So this is terrible. What this means is that these lakes, which some of them aren't supposed to be there, many of them aren't supposed to be full, literally burst out of the ice dam that holds them or whatever bowl they're in, and absolutely cascade like flash floods down the mountain. They take out bridges. They release millions of cubic meters of water and debris, and take out homes, roads. It's not a good thing. So this is the Rakaposhi, which is one of the peaks in the Karakoram Mountains. It means snow-covered. It's also sometimes called Dumani, or Mother of Mist. And this is one of Harris Sakib's photos of just absolutely magnificent. I mean, are we surprised that our scriptures speak to the hills and the mountains and the majesty of the divine when we take a look at photos like this? Absolutely breathtaking. It rises about 25,000 feet in elevation. There's also high mountain places like this. This is near the Karakora Mountains. It's an alpine plateau, about 13,000 feet in elevation. It's a UNESCO registered national park. It's a world treasure, this ecosystem, this amazing, beautiful place in Pakistan. This is the Indus River. Again, look what God has done. That's my Christian hat talking. I know different faiths have different origin stories, but I cannot help but look at this and just be in awe of our beautiful planet and world. The Indus River is one of the longest rivers in the world. It's fed by glaciers, so that glacial melt. It runs and flows south through Pakistan, through the Sindh Valley, and into the Arabian Sea. About 2,000 miles this flows in. So believe it or not, and we've seen all this water, right? A crazy amount of water. And yet in the valley, they're dealing with water scarcity. Water scarcity. So water management and agricultural practices are a contributor, but the reality is that climate change is throwing climate cycles out of balance. Heat causes evaporation. Water evaporates from soils and rivers and plants and crops and wildlife and human beings. And everything gets thirstier. And when things are thirstier, they need more water to survive. And water then gets scarce. And so the effects are for both the surface and the groundwater. And this is from the Express Tribune in Pakistan. The aquifer in the Indus Basin, Pakistan's chief water source, is rapidly depleting with little or no signs of recharge and is considered the second most stressed in the world. So even less water is available while more is needed. And this is going on in Oregon too, lots of places. The really dramatic, we're seeing a really dramatic movement here in places like Pakistan. And so the other problem is when you've got a lot of people using a diminishing water source, you run into problems of water contamination where water becomes undrinkable. So, a lot is going on here. I want to draw your attention, though, to this little guy getting water. So this, was taken in 2005, but I'm guessing he was about 5 years old at the time, which is the age of my grandson. So based on dates, he's probably born in the year 2000, which is the same as my niece. And he was born at 667 parts per million. Again, his life has only known the trajectory of carbon in the air as going up. If he has remained in the Sindh Valley, he may be one of the 30 million Pakistanis who face continuing water scarcity and the challenges of accessing clean water. So this is a consequence largely of climate change. So this is the importance of community stability. So climate change interrupts social systems as well as ecological and economic ones. Again, loss and damage isn't just about what you lose out of your money in your pocket. It's about your whole way of life, living, culture, home, the whole thing. So these two girls are studying at their home, and women are especially vulnerable. Women-led households experience higher rates of poverty, and women lack public power and in both policy making and commerce. And that just makes it more challenging for women. This girl, just love her expression. So in rural Sindh, many people are categorized as economically poor. And I want to push back against this idea of poor people as miserable or somehow, you can be rich in many ways. These are wonderful people. And if they're experiencing poverty, that's something we need to look at on us. And poverty in rural Sindh was determined to be about 75% in a 2014-16 study by the UN. And good effort has been made to improve those numbers in 2021. A study from PIDE improved that number to 57%. But climate change threatens all that work. So again, what is her trajectory, right? She is 11 in the photo, maybe as old as 13. I asked myself, at the carbon level in the atmosphere of 416 parts per million, what is the rest of her life going to look like? What about the girls who are 11 right now or 9 right now? What can they expect for heart and home and health and future? So this is precious resources for stable living. Livestock make a huge difference for the economic stability of rural people, especially the water buffalo. Money earned from livestock can be a game changer for families. But again, climate disasters undermine this work of combating poverty, with 7.6 million people in the recent flooding were forced to take refuge and their homes destroyed, many livestock lost, many couldn't seek shelter in some designated shelter spaces because their livestock couldn't be accommodated, and their livestock is how they feed their kids, right? How they send their kids to school. So it's a really important thing. So this is just a little bit more on displacement. So in thinking about the millions displaced by the flood in Sindh, it is important to remember that they are by no means the only people dealing with displacement in Pakistan. Pakistan provides shelter and hospitality to their neighbors, including this woman and her children who are Afghan refugees. And there are an estimated 3 million Afghans seeking refuge in Pakistan today. So providing shelter, water, resources to the displaced is an enormous undertaking, and really to provide medical care, to make sure adults and children stay healthy. Disruption is a big deal, and climate change is causing disruption in a lot of different ways. And this gentleman, spring in 2022, we're going to talk about heat here. Temps in Jacobabad. There's a lot, sorry, my tongue. So that's the known hotspot in Pakistan, and it is in the Sindh Valley. They were over, temps they were over 100 degrees for 51 straight days. And the highest temp was 123.8 degrees. And the temps reached 122 degrees on 3 other occasions. This was reported in Inside Climate News. And again, I've got that little green arrow on my box at the top of the screen. So 223.8 degrees is not as high as it's going to go. That's just how high it got this year. And it was just a little bit less high last year. This is not going in the right direction. There's also, as we know, work in the science areas about how we can attribute these changes directly to climate change. And the Attribution Center said that climate change made this heat wave event 30 times more likely. And with other attribution studies, they'll go as far as to say it's just impossible in our old climate and only possible in the new climate we're creating. These women, heat have shown to impact women more than men. Women are more vulnerable, as we've said before. They also labor outside, just like men do, tending the fields, but they also do the cooking and the early child care, and they care for the livestock. So they face greater health risks from heat, and they comprise a larger percentage of patients needing heat stroke treatment in local hospitals. Again, this is life at 416 parts per million. This is what the kind of heat people are calling unlivable. And families in the hottest areas are migrating from even within the country. So in-country migration means that thousands of families have to pack up and seek cooler places during the hottest months. We have, again, new climate words and phrases. This new one is distress migration. So we can't just call it regular migration at these points. These people are migrating because they are experiencing real distress. And here these beautiful women are providing food as part of a whole region that provides food to Pakistan's population of over 200 million people. Their work is valuable, and they're struggling to survive in this heat. Men also obviously work outdoors in the heat. But food security isn't, so you can see how food security is impacted. So heat, drought, floods, they affect crop production and food security. Pakistan used to export millions of I don't know what the measurement is, bushels of grain to other countries like Vietnam. That's really had to scale back because I need that food in-house. Heat, it impacts the nutritional quality of crop yields, and climate chaos just in general interferes with things like pollinating, flowering, and harvest cycles. So these are the statistics of the flood, the 2022 flood, the spring flood that just inundated Pakistan. July rainfall, and we're going to talk specifically about the Sindh province, but Pakistan has a number of provinces. So the July rainfall in Sindh was 307% above normal. In August, it was 726% above the August average. In Patidhan, Sindh, June to August, that town received 70 inches of rain. The vast inland lake that took over huge swaths of the country, lasted for months. It's not gone yet, and Horace will talk more about that. 500 bridges were destroyed, countless roads, millions of acres of cropland destroyed and damaged, dates, cotton, chili, rice, sugarcane, sesame, billions in damages, 1 million livestock killed, 33 million people affected, 7.6 million people displaced, 2 million homes, schools, whole villages were submerged or destroyed. And then also the cases of malaria and dengue fever, thousands of people suffering from these diseases, and children being very hard hit. And 1,500 plus people have died. Now, this is an October figure. With all of the after effects, we know that that number is higher. All at 416 parts per million, right? So that arrow is not going in the right direction. I'm not sure what we're expecting to accomplish by continuing to burn fossil fuels. So this is a quote from a gentleman in a refugee area. His name is Dilwar Chandio. Apologies for the pronunciation. He is quoted by Nazish Brohi in The Atlantic. If you haven't read this story from The Atlantic, I suggest you do. It's called One Nation Underwater. And he is quoted as saying, "What next? Hailstorms in May, monsoon in December. We can't flatten the mountains, and we can't stop the cloudbursts. Farmers work with nature's cycles. If nature goes rogue, we're finished. The farmer in me drowned." So Pakistan is not responsible for the crisis. This is a statement by the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. It's not responsible for the crisis. This is a product of climate change. This was caused by those that are populating the atmosphere with greenhouse gases. The G20, the biggest economies in the world, represent 80% of the emissions, and Pakistan less than 1%. And look at these wonderful gentlemen here who deserve a 280 parts per million life. A couple of other views of Pakistan, because the sacredness, the beauty, the majesty, the creation, the awe that is in this place. This is a Neelam Valley. This is upper, I can't see the whole, I've got it covered. Kachura Lake, 8,000 feet in elevation. But this lake is also known as Shangri-La. And I mean, what? How can we mess this up? We just can't do that. So refuge, restoration, remedy. These gentlemen are in Lahore, preparing for prayer. At 280 parts per million, the climate to support human flourishing. That's where we are a species for all species, right? And we got to bring that CO2 down. So Islam arose at 280 parts per million. Moses wandered at 280 parts per million. Buddha taught at 280 parts per million. Lord Shiva cried at 280 parts per million. Jesus arrived at 280 parts per million. We have to do something And not only loss and damage in terms of, dealing with these losses, but we got to turn the ship around.